The phases and development of the French Revolution, starting in 1789, shaped the French government and became one of the most significant examples of revolution in European history. At the time, France was separated into three estates: the clergy, the nobles, and the rest of the French people, known as the bourgeoisie. While the first and second estates lived favorable lives, the third estate still constituted a large margin of the population and ranged from the middle class to the peasants. Such social inequality, as well as inadequate supervision and authority from the monarchy, caused dissent from the third estate. Also contributing to this was a rise in taxes as well as unfair class separation, which ultimately resulted in radical behavior from the lower class.
What can I buy with this? With that, the caution. Let's find out. Can you? You sick bastard! Who even eats the enfies? Spare change! Merci! Spare change! Only have but a few francs! Spare change! Heretics! Burn them!
The personalities of King Louis XVI and his Austrian wife Marie Antoinette sparked a lot of ridicule and scandal that would further anger their people. The couple's frivolous lifestyle made matters worse as the French treasury became bankrupt.
Madame Antoinette, here are your dresses.
Oh, lace, no? Brown grapes. Polka dots? Ugh. Lace? Oh, no. Buttons! Oh, no. Filthy peasant, go fetch me more.
In 1789, Charles de Calonne, the Controller General of Finance, called for a meeting of the Estates General, the parliamentary body of France. The Estates General was called forth as a last resort. It had not met since 1614. The meeting was called together to fix the crucial financial crisis in France. In addition to economic problems, France was close to financial collapse because of the high costs of war and royal extravagance. The country borrowed money from other countries and had a huge deficit of 4 billion livres, roughly 40 billion US dollars, and half of the government's spending went straight into paying interest. The situation was so bad that many countries refused to lend France money for fear that they would never be paid back. An original plan was created to solve the problem by calling an assembly of notables to convene to revamp the fiscal and administrative system of the state, but this proved disastrous because the nobles and peasants would not cooperate. After the assembly's failure, the Estates General was called, basically admitting to the fact that the consent of the nation is required for the government to raise taxes. The Estates General had equal representation for the first and second estates, but double representation for the third estate because it was a much larger class, with roughly 97% of the population. The third estate created the Cachets des Doléances, which were statements of local grievances which advocated a regular constitutional government that would take away the fiscal privileges of the first and second estate and regenerate the country. The first and second estate representatives wanted to vote by order, with each group having veto powers, largely enabling them to have a bigger control of the government. The third estate wanted to vote by head, because it would give them the advantage. When the first estate declared to vote by order, the third estate responded by creating a national assembly to write a constitution. 3 days later, they went to their meeting room and found it locked, so they moved to the nearby tennis courts and made the tennis court oaths, where they swore to keep meeting until they made a new French constitution. They had no legal act to do this, and the king sided with the first estate and threatened to use force to dissolve the Estates General. This was one of the first steps in the French Revolution.
The pamphlet, What is the Third Estate, by clergyman Abbé Sieyès, only stoked more discontent from the National Assembly.
What is the third estate? Everything. What has it been thus far in the political order? Nothing. What does it demand? To become something.
The storming of the Bastille was a revolt by a mob of 8,000 Parisians in search of weapons in the Bastille Armory and state prison. To the Parisians, it was a sign of the government's despotic policies. The armory was guarded by a Marquis de Lanay and a garrison of 114 men. After 3 hours, Lanay surrendered, but 98 Parisians were killed, so they beat the Marquis to death, decapitated him, and paraded his head through the streets. When King Louis XVI declared the event a revolt, the Duke replied, "No, sire, it is a revolution." The Great Fear was partially caused by the agrarian revolts and was a vast panic that quickly spread through France between July 20th and August 6th. It included fear of invasion by foreign troops and suspicion of an aristocratic plot that led to the formation of new citizens' militias and permanent committees.
My king? Good. I like your crown. It looks bright and shiny today.
Give me queen! I want a leg!
I want a name! Oh, my king, go!
The Civil Constitution of the Clergy, passed in July 1790, required all priests to swear an oath of loyalty to the Revolution. This also confiscated lands owned by the Catholic Church. With political culture in France openly embracing symbols of revolution, the Jacobins Club grew in influence and would later produce many of the most important leaders of the radical phase of the revolution.
What are you doing, Miss Diggles?
Oh, you know, writing my declaration on the rights of women and the citizen.
But you know the men will never listen.
I know.
Audacity. More audacity. Always audacity.
When the revolution became more radical after 1792, two prominent political parties emerged, the Girondin Party and the Mountain. The Girondin Party argued that the only way to save the revolution is to spread it across Europe by force of arms. However, the Mountain took a more violent approach by convicting the king of treason and sentencing him to death by guillotine.
Bring them in.
Off to the guillotine with ye! Queen Marie Antoinette. King Louis XVI.
Bend over.
Robespierre was one of the most important members of the National Convention. He was a member of the Estates General, the Constituent Art Assembly, the Jacobin Club, and the Committee of Public Safety. He was against the death penalty and for the abolishment of slavery, equal rights, universal suffrage, and the establishment of a republic. He was called the Incorruptible, and he loved the idea of people and thought they were inherently good. In the National Convention, he pushed dechristianization and the new calendar, which took away all religious holidays and Sunday, the traditional day of worship. Instead, it included festivals formed on revolutionary virtues such as virtue, intelligence, labor, opinion, and rewards, as well as cementing their embraces in the national fraternity. As the revolution progressed, however, the Incorruptible changed his views and became the dominant figure in the continuation of the Reign of Terror and became obsessed with purifying the body politic and all of the corrupt. After this, the Republic of Virtue would ensue. Other members of the committee began to feel unsafe, and an anti-Robespierre coalition in the National Convention gathered enough votes to condemn him. He was guillotined July 28, 1794, which was the beginning of the end of the radical stage of the revolution.
By 1793, France was ruled by the Committee of Public Safety, a 12-member executive body elected each month by the Convention, steering France through the Reign of Terror. Prominent figures involved with the committee included Maximilien Robespierre, who had increasingly become more ruthless, and Jean-Paul Marat, a journalist who actively supported violent radical activity. The committee ironically did the opposite of what it was named for, resulting in thousands of careless deaths and acts of violence.
Established by the National Convention and the Committee of Public Safety to meet the domestic crisis, the Reign of Terror aimed to protect the Republic from internal enemies who supported tyranny and were enemies of liberty and supported revolution. Victims ranged from royalty, Marie Antoinette, to revolutionaries and peasants. Many were those who opposed the radical sans-culottes. The victim count may have reached 50,000. The terror showed little class prejudice. It basically killed everyone equally. Any opposition was against the French government and therefore an enemy to the people. Once these enemies were eliminated and the war and domestic emergencies ended, the Republic of Virtue would ensue.
Those bloody sans-culottes.
Hello, Monsieur Marat.
Oh, hello, Madame Catherine.
What are you doing?
Simply saving the political situation in France.
Oh, really? And how will you do that?
Oh, it's simple. We just chop off more heads.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
In the principle of levée en masse, all French citizens were required to contribute to the war effort. An army of over 1 million men was assembled, rendering it the largest citizen-based army in European history. The regime known as the Directory ruled France for 4 years. However, political divisions soon returned and plagued the Directory with opposition.